Hey everybody, welcome to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye, and as always, a special guest today, and really excited to introduce you all to our friend Andrea, who I've been friends with you and your husband for a little while.
Yes.
And Andrea has served on staff at churches for, the past 14 years, and has done her dissertation and lots of great things to share today. So, Andrea, why don't you say hello to everybody and tell them whatever you want to tell them about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I think you should know I'm a Notre Dame football fan.
Yes.
And that I, more importantly, have a husband that I've been married to for 22 years. I'm not sure why I went, but it's like I can feel that it's almost football season. And being up in the north makes me feel like fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two amazing kids. I have a daughter who is a senior, and I have a son who's a freshman, both in high school. And so it's been a really sweet season. We're from Dallas and have really been in the South, even though I'm from the Midwest, been in the South for like the last 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's nice to have you back in the north.
It's nice to be back.
Yeah. Well, we'll get started with our first question from the bowl. Oh, this always is nice and awkward.
This is
Okay.
the most nervous part of the whole podcast.
Ooh,
right here.
I think this is a good one. What hobby do you wish you had more time for?
Ooh.
I can go first. I would say I wish I had more time for gardening because we do have a garden, but it demonstrates that we don't have the time for a garden.
It's true.
We have time in the beginning when we plant, but we
Yeah.
don't have time when we
It's
harvest.
like this reminder, all that,
Yeah, we pulled
Yeah.
out all the potatoes, and they're still sitting on the counter. I need to do something with those.
It's true.
So I enjoy gardening. I just wish I had more time for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
I wish that I was better at like doing home renovations, but by the time
It asks how much. Do you wish you had more time?
I know,
for?
but in order for, I would need a lot of time because not
To
just the
get
time
better.
to do it. I would need the time to
true.
learn it
To
as
watch
well.
the
Okay,
YouTube
yes.
videos.
Yes.
Valid.
Yeah.
Which I
Valid.
have friends who just do it in the middle of the night, but I also require 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So that's probably the one.
That's funny.
Wow, y'all's are both so productive because I was thinking of birding,
Yes.
but I'm not. And in my mind, first I would need a pair of binoculars.
Yeah.
I would need more time, of course, too, and I'd like to go into the woods, find birds
Yeah.
with my binoculars. But I do try to feed a lot of birds at my house. I
Oh,
had to
that's
kind of
fun.
ratchet it back, just budget wise. I'm like, okay, how much money are we spending on bird food? I feel like they have their own resources too. But I want to contribute, but
Yeah.
I don't want to feel responsible for
Yeah.
their whole livelihood, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My grandma had that. She had bird feeders right outside the window, and
Yep.
it was actually incredibly fun
Yep.
to sit at the window and watch them.
Did they notice when you cut back? They're like fluttering outside the window, like,
Yeah.
Andrea, we noticed we're down 30% on food out here.
And part of another strategy is to keep the squirrels off. And so
Yeah.
that takes time too. And it's not always
Seriously.
time to watch for squirrels.
Right.
Sometimes you have to work or raise children and things. So,
Right.
Yeah,
Be an
make
adult.
dinner.
Yeah.
Actually, that brings up a really important topic I wanted to talk to you about, which is that some kids have imaginary friends, but your son had a different kind of friend for a while, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how that ended. So Parker
Yeah.
had a friend
Uh-huh.
that was a real live wild duck.
Duck.
Oh my word, I'm remembering this now.
Yeah.
And is this a tragic ending? Do we need to prepare the audience?
It's probably the right ending. I wouldn't say it's
Okay.
tragic, but it's like
Does it involve a grill?
it's like sad and sweet, you
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
because what happened is that we went away on a 2-week trip up north when we were living in Florida, and we went and did a long visit, which was really sweet. But it was enough time had lapsed that it was Duckless had kind of forgotten.
That was his name,
That was
Duckless?
Yeah, we named him Duckless. And for a couple of weeks, it was like Parker was bringing him into our pool. I didn't understand the amount of poop. I couldn't think of a better way of saying that.
No, it's-
And so like in the garage and in the I'm like, I don't. So we had to kind of then, place some limits, and y'all can be in the yard, and
Yes.
and so yeah, but mostly but he lived in our neighborhood the whole time, like for 4 years. He would come around some, but there was like a couple months where they were together every day, and Douglas would just follow him around everywhere, quacking, and but that trip kind of disrupted it, and it was like more like, now you're like not my brother, you're like a distant cousin. And occasionally we see each other. That's kind of how I think it ended. That's
So it was Douglas that broke it off?
I think yeah. And he probably was like, I can't handle this roller coaster. You're here every day, you're gone. I've got to make my own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's funny. I forgot about that. I remember seeing that on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did follow
we
the
did.
adventures of Parker and Douglas.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So is that why you wrote your dissertation on the migration patterns of Arctic penguins? That's not what it's about.
Oh my goodness.
It's all birds for me, obviously.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what you actually wrote about in your dissertation, there's my transition,
Nice. Yes.
was it talked about rest and rhythms and work, really, but really putting an emphasis on letting that be dictated by a high view of God.
Yeah.
And, I'm adding some to this right now, but
I like it. Yeah.
The difference would be having a low view of God.
Yes.
And I could extrapolate on that, but why don't you talk
same
about
here.
what,
Yes.
I would say, even for me, I would say, man, what does a high view versus a low view of God even mean? And because it's different wording than I think what I have heard before.
Yeah. I'll give you kind of my thesis statement was around exploring the theological truth that God is not a user, and how charismatic Christian leaders partner with God to change the world without exhausting themselves. And I was trying to make the connection between the higher our view of God and kind of the healthier, maybe is another way of saying our view of God, the more scriptural our view of God, as opposed to maybe our own culture and kind of human experience. When that gets better and better, the way we hold our purpose, the way we hold our work, the way we hold our vocation, our what God's given us to do, like, gets more sustainable and less exhausting. So really, my dissertation was just a 3-year process of kind of studying my own story and the pain that I had that came from having a pretty low view of God, an impoverished view of God, and not really seeing him for who he was. And so, and I always like to say too that I don't mean that God does not use us, and I'm not really particular about language or now this means don't ever say this or that, or because I talk a lot about like I think especially for charismatic and Pentecostal leaders, like we have a tendency to think in the terms of like what we do for God, and we don't use as much language as other Protestant traditions that would use like with God. And to me that's been a pivotal difference.
Yeah.
And has made work and purpose feel more sustainable. So I like to say, like, of course God uses us.
Yeah.
It's that he's not a user, which a user is someone who is like an exploiter, someone who is so obsessed with the end, so obsessed with the mission, that he'll use any means to accomplish it. And it doesn't really matter what happens to the resource or the tool in his hand. It's just all about reaching more people. And so you can maybe get some hints from like my story and how I saw God as a bit of a taskmaster growing up.
Yeah.
I read a study at one point from, I think, a secular author actually, and talked about how charismatic Pentecostal Christianity has the greatest ability to really lead to massive change and transformation, not just in the lives of people, but across continents, because of the combination of the theology of God, but also the empowering of the believer
Yeah.
by the Holy Spirit. And do you think that's where some of that comes from, is because there is such an emphasis on the Holy Spirit's work within you and what he wants to do through you?
Yeah.
That's where that comes from?
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful emphasis and also a great responsibility. And for me, makes it even more important that we continue to increase our view of God and see God as loving as we can possibly imagine him to be, because then that makes room for us to also be the end and also be the one that he came for, not just the one he wants to use to get more people
Right.
that he came for. And so it kind of creates this space for ourselves, our own hurts, our own struggles. And we don't lose mission either. And it's not all about us. It's just that there's room in life then to attend to our own souls and our own struggles without losing this heartbeat to reach and to help and to serve others. So I know I went like long and deep in my research on activism, because that would be the evangelical distinctive, to your point. Like, because it was Protestantism kind of all held these other tenets, these other three tenets, but evangelicalism what kind of made evangelicalism separate from Protestant, kind of its own branch, was activism. Like so it's like the responsibility to take all these things that we believe and to do something with them.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And to evangelize the world and and go and do. So, yeah, I think that's what has to be kind of stewarded really well.
Yeah.
So when you discover that and you start to look at that and say, man, maybe I've been doing a lot of things for God or pushing people to do things for God, I want to put more of an emphasis on with God.
Yeah.
And I know I'm really, really, really boiling down,
Yeah.
trying to get to the bones of what you're saying, but practically within you or within your research, what did that pivot? What did that change? Like, what were the practical changes that followed?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I have probably, when I think of for God, I think of God kind of far away, watching me and watching my performance. And so it kind of has made it less relational and less of a shepherding and more like I always picture like the grumpy men from the Muppets that kind of sit up in the balcony. I'm sure you young people wouldn't know what I'm talking about.
I do. I can picture it in my mind.
Yes. And it's like, is that all you got? And so you can do better than that. And so for me, that 4 was always felt like this performance mentality. Like, is God pleased? Was that good? Is it, and I think for me, kind of relieves some of that pressure. And it's something I pay attention to if I find myself feeling anxious or wondering, is God disappointed? Did I do enough? Have I done enough? And that paradigm of seeing him as with me in it, leading me, his presence with me at all times, as opposed to a distant judge kind of watching to see if I live up to the very high expectations I have of myself. So in some ways it's an internal posture for me, but it's something now that over a number of years I feel like, I can recognize much more quickly and go, that's kind of a lie. That God is distant and super easy to disappoint and frustrate, and and so that he's with me in this, and that together we're trying to serve my daughter or this person in our church or at school or wherever you find yourselves, and just there's been a different pressure than I feel internally and that I give to the other people I'm trying to help. it's kind of changed that interaction with one another too.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be more practical, but I don't really know if I was.
Oh, I think that's great.
I think you're saying it's a shift in the posture of our hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think too, we've walked through this in a way of trying, not exactly, but trying to discover this. And a lot of it took us to go back of even family of origin and look,
Yeah.
if you were an achiever when you were, 15, probably may play into your walk with the Lord today. And how can you meet that 15-year-old in your mind and say, walk them through how to overcome that, and the Lord can walk with you through that. What would you say were signs? Like, I think medically, as my background was medical, so I'm like, if I'm diagnosed with something, there's symptoms. And so let's say maybe I'm way taking it the wrong way, but maybe someone listening thinks medically as well. But if you were like diagnosed, air quotes used, with a low view of God, what would be the primary symptoms that would be kind of revealing themselves, right, in your life?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll stay close to home and talk about maybe my symptoms. I think one of the very interesting things about seeing, even subconsciously seeing God as a user, and obsessed with productivity and efficiency, is that this becomes kind of how we treat one another. And I think when I think of myself, and I think this can be a temptation for anyone that has a mission or a vision or a purpose, even a really good one, to not use other people as a means to their end, but to see people always as the end. And so, and it's not that we aren't the means too. That's what I would say, like, that there's a real inherent tension in our faith that we need to increase the capacity for, to hold both more. But as far as so I'm like, the way you treat other people, the way you see other people, and if you're not interested in others, if they can't do something for you, to me might indicate something. You're not seeing God. You probably have an impoverished view of God and of yourself. That's informing how you treat and how you see, or really don't see other people. And so I think that's an indication. I think for me, it's the kind of classic achieving, not resting, because I always kind of associated rest not with grace, not with God's design, because He's so amazing and He knows what we need. He knows we can't work 7 or 8 days a week. And He didn't design it that way. But for me, I couldn't rest at a deep level in my soul, but also, physically was always a struggle for me. I always felt guilty, like I was doing something wrong and I hadn't earned it, as opposed to seeing like rest as a gift. So that was definitely an indication for me, was like my lack of being able to let it go. And when I see this in people, or Christ followers, leaders, I think I just have a lot of compassion. I'm like, you do have a part, there is work to do, but it's not all on you. And when we don't rest and we don't let it go, I think there are deeper things going on. I think it could be part of, it could be a symptom.
Totally. Took us going on sabbatical in 2020 to face this, would you say?
Yeah, because I think until you really feel what rest takes, like, you don't know what you're missing.
Or you've realized you never have actually rested. You've like pseudo rested.
Because I remember just going off social media for that time and just being away and just
even like no news, because you like the news.
And just experiencing something different. And then the moment that we came back, COVID was just coming into the world. And
We
I
actually had to come
remember-
back 3 weeks early because our team was like, do we cancel Easter? What do we do?
But I remember picking up my phone and picking up like the news and picking up social media and actually having an angst in me about re-engaging that.
Yeah.
Because realizing, oh no, there's a rest and a stillness I've been in.
Yeah.
And I know that I can't live in that forever.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
but trying to
yes.
figure out, like, I realized I was sacrificing something by being, and for me, that was different, you know, and I think for people listening, that might be a change of mind. Cause I mean, for me, I was a North Dakota farm kid, you know, and when you're farming in the summer, like there's no stop. You get done with one field, you go right to the next one.
Yeah.
Like time
We're
is
not
money.
going to stop
you know?
and celebrate or rest for,
Yeah.
you know, a
I know, I
day
think
because you
if-
completed.
I think if I would do it all over, I would get done with the field. I'd step out of the tractor and I would be like, way to go, you know,
Yeah,
because just
right.
not knowing how to celebrate or for it to just be enough,
Yeah.
you know, and
Or
having,
to rest from it. Yeah.
yeah. And just having to like, and it wasn't like, I don't fault people. Like there was a
Yeah.
lot of work
Yeah.
to do and
Yeah.
whatever, if you don't get to the grain, it falls to the ground, you know, and,
Yep.
but realizing, man, there's some stuff that I have to unlearn,
Yeah.
you know, so that I can relearn what is this actually supposed to look like? Because you can easily translate that into ministry. And I've definitely gone through seasons where I'm like,
Yeah.
it all depends on me. I gotta go. In fact, I heard somebody write about the quarter life crisis for somebody called into vocational ministry is about a quarter of the way through your life, and you're gonna hit a point where you realize you can't do it in your own strength. You know, and I think for me the habit was do it in my own strength, and then when I can't anymore, really cry out to God and hope that He'll bridge the gap, and then do it in my own strength again.
Yes.
And realizing that is not a sustainable pattern
Yeah.
or a very joyful one of
Yeah.
following Jesus, you know.
I can only speak for our experience, but finding rest has been really tied to our rhythms. I don't know about you guys, but with a Sabbath, and we're still figuring that out. And the motto in our home is, even to our kids, we work our tails off for 6 days a week and we completely rest for one. And trying to perpetuate that and plant that in their hearts, and even saying it for my own mind and heart as well. And even recently, we're just in probably our busiest season.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you say, how are you to someone and they say busy? But we've tried to stop saying that because no, we choose how we spend our time and what we do with our time.
Yeah.
And it is on us. We're adults. But in rest, in this busy season, I mean, Sabbath has been hard. And it's been an identifier of, man, we're on Sabbath day together, but I'm angsty about this or that or what we need to get done. And so we've had to walk and talk through that of like, okay, well, why are you feeling like anxious when we're trying to rest? And just saying, like, I don't know if you ever feel like, man, I've arrived at understanding rest. It seems to me, this is my perspective, I want you guys to speak into it, but that the world has been set up to assault against any form of rest for your soul, for your mind, for your heart, and as even our schedules set us up to not. So how do we keep fighting? Like, how do you fight for true rest or fight for Sabbath rest and view it as a gift rather than we don't work our tails off for 6 days to earn the Sabbath. We take our Sabbath and so we can, go out from there. We work from rest, not for it. How do you feel like as believers fight that?
It's such a challenge. I'm sure. I mean, it seems like it was a challenge for the ancient people of God too, and the Israelites, right? They seem to really struggle as well. So I'm like, it feels like, well, it's even harder now. But I'm like, I don't know. It's always been hard.
Right.
What is it about humans that we just resist? This kind of tangible way of saying the universe is not on my shoulders. And when I find myself resisting Sabbath or rest, that's kind of where my mind goes. What is it about the season I'm in or where my mind and my heart is at right now that feels like I can't afford to receive this gift? And it becomes kind of a spiritually formative question and, and an invitation. I think I always want to say too, like, that there's grace for seasons. I'm not sure, there's just a fine line between like responding to God's invitation and like beating ourselves up, or that's not helpful,
Right.
And so I think this is part of the new covenant and with Jesus. There's just, there's grace, and that to always hear it as an invitation, like that it's waiting for you, and there's wisdom in it, and there's life for your soul in it. And I think if there's a way of, during really intense seasons, of at least reminding yourself, this is not the best way. This is a season, but I'm getting, and even having some accountability around, hey, the next 3 weeks, with a friend or a spouse, or, like, I'm probably not going to rest very much. And I wonder too, is there a way of resting it might not be a typical full day off, but is it a couple of hours of your phone in airplane mode? Is there ways of disconnecting and not always being on and available or refreshing or checking that can be pockets of it as well? So I don't know if you arrive. I mean, I definitely haven't, and I think every season looks a little different. I would just encourage people, don't give up. Don't stop wrestling with it. And even if it's a couple hours a week, and that's what it looks like. And if you feel anxious about, I think that's what you bring into the presence of God,
right?
Is like, why do I feel so anxious about not doing anything? And that becomes a place where we meet God.
Yeah. That's so good. I just discovered that on your iPhone, you can set like a focused or like notification
do not disturb.
Like schedule. And so even today I had to shut it off at a certain time because I had to remember that I was picking you up from the airport. But I just automated it knowing, man, I know not every Saturday it's going to look this way to just totally be unavailable. But at least try put systems in place too to help you get there. Seems like there's just a lot of vying for our attention in different ways. Is that the word? Is that a word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Okay,
word.
Josh is the word person. He
approves
so
dying, I think.
Yeah. Pulling. Yeah. No, he's like
it's
very
so
smart.
wise to Jenaye with your kids. I think it's just such a challenge, I think, for parents and technology and phone. I mean, and I kind of look back and go, I maybe wish that picking up the phone or when here were my kids, I mean,
Right.
I have a lot of compassion for myself in those years and how hard they were, but I think it's using like hacks, if you will, like that, of just like, I'm just gonna silence notifications to just help me be more present and attentive to God, but also to the people in my home or the person right across from me. And I think those are Sabbath keeping things, even not just to God, because we imagine like, oh my word, how long do I have to pray and like be quiet or, but it's like being attentive and available to one another and the people God has given you. I think is part of Sabbath keeping. And if you look at like the Jewish tradition, I mean, this is part, every time I read the meal thing and the lighting of the candle and the breaking of bread together, and it's like, there's a lot of life in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that like the Puritan kind of version of Sabbath is very solemn, lines up with the historic Sabbath. Anyway, I just think, but being available really to one another is a way of keeping Sabbath in a different way than Monday through Friday, maybe, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
I mean, we read a lot of Jefferson Bethke and John Mark Comer. And I mean, these guys read a lot about Sabbath. And what I love that they said, because I think there's the flip side of like, there's people that don't want to work hard either. And like, like there's the movement for a 4-day work week and, and thinking that, more time off for vacation will just fix it. Well, that's not actually going to fix your soul either, like boredom.
Yeah.
And if you're scrolling and still feeding that.
Escape,
I think of the stoplight test. which is when you pull up to a red light and you're strapped in your car and there's nothing else that you can do to occupy your time. What do you do while you have to sit there for 2 minutes? Like, are you able to just sit there?
Wow.
Or is there this pace, this inner pace that's just going and you have to pick up your phone or you have to like, you know, it's like, for me, it's
Accomplish
always
something, do something, check in on something.
yeah. Or can I just be? And if I
Yeah.
can't just be for a 2-minute red light, like then
Yeah.
what really is my inner pace
Yeah.
at any given
Yes.
moment? But I love what they talk about
great.
because they say, you know, rest is not just, oh, I'm not going to work today.
Yeah.
Like rest is worship.
Yeah.
And worship is a lot of different things. It's breaking bread with people. You know, I think one of them writes about like, can you plan a Christmas day once a week?
They say it's like
or
our holiday once a week.
Yeah.
Like, what would
Oh,
we
I
do
love
on
that.
Christmas? Or
Like,
like,
be together, fun pack it.
yeah, just let's
Be with
enjoy
people you
one
want to be
another.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And
For
really
me, it's
that
always
art.
nature.
Yeah.
Be outside and in not a hurried way, you know, but in an intentional way, even if it's just an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think, you know, you read Psalms and like David, the shepherd boy, walking through nature, quiet nights, all he can hear is sheep. And I'm like, there's something profound. You mentioned deep work earlier. You know, I think we always talk pre-podcast and then reference things from the pre-podcast.
Yeah.
But
Y'all know. Yeah.
I think you said the words deep work. And I know there's like a book called Deep Work.
Yeah.
And there's a space to create in your life of deep work where you can get beyond the email, you know, that keeps popping up or the notifications or the whirlwind tasks and get into that deeper space of thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just we don't go there anymore. Like the
Yeah.
soul searching deeper. We don't set aside that time. And I think there's something lost, you know? So I just wanted to say it's not also just like, well, if I could just have 3 days off to watch Netflix and just be on my phone and take a vacation, I'd be better. No, you might come back just as exhausted, even though you didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, that's not exactly what Sabbath or rest actually is, right?
Yeah, I said, and one of the things I had written was that as I was processing, I'm like, we don't idolize leisure or work as true Christ followers. Only God is center of our lives. But I think there is this tendency to an extreme, like one or the other, where either freedom and leisure perhaps, or just doing kind of what's life-giving to me. I've had this like picture of bodies of water as kind of an illustration. And one is like a pond that's like, we all know, right? Ponds are really pretty to look at and they're very serene and have a tendency to grow algae and fungus and things, but also very serene. And I always think people that tend to be more like ponds, they're very, I love their serenity. I love their boundaries. And usually these are people that, you know, have maybe deeper levels of contentment and are good at rest. And then there are people that lean more towards like a canal, you know, where it's like the only purpose is to receive and to give and to move along and to, you know, and there's an urgency to them. There's and I appreciate like kind of the mission and this like purpose, like we can rest later in heaven, you know, but there's work to do and we've got to move this water, you know, and these boats is probably more what they're moving. But anyway, and so I have had this picture when I like have studied the life of Jesus of like a better image as a reservoir for it seems like the way all metaphors break down, of course, but like a way of looking at the life of Jesus and the invitation for Christ followers when it comes to work and rest, because it's like, actually there's like this middle way, because reservoirs retain and then give out of the overflow without loss to itself. And so to me, again, this is a high view of God because it's like God loves me, not just what I can accomplish for him while I'm on planet Earth. So there's enough, like it's important for me to receive, like a pond, but there's actually good work to do and things that people around me need.
So let it flow through.
And yes, and so that there is, this receiving, but also this giving.
Yeah.
And to me, there's this like middle way. But I know I see that in the like broader Christian culture, like these swings. And actually, it's all through church history. It's like really since after like the church fathers, because you get away from like the most integrated, emulsified, which is like a salad dressing word, you know, where you take like being and doing and you whip it at such a high speed, it becomes like a third thing, right?
Wow.
And you get away from the most integrated, perfectly lived life, you know, and it just becomes this like pendulum swing. And that's part of what I was studying. And that's what I had told you earlier. I kind of got stuck on the Puritans, but anyway, but it was like, yeah, there's been this like very contemplative monastic life, and then the Protestant Reformation kind of, and this emphasis on the active life. And it's kind of been this back and forth. And I would just say it's like both.
Yeah.
Seriously, I think some of the best wisdom I ever got from a seasoned leader was, Josh, it's okay to be a man of many different streams. And I'm not saying like take a little of every religion and put it together into what you want, but I'm saying like, from, you know, a more Puritan driven, you know, or whatever, it's okay
There's,
to
like,
take the
gifts in
truths
each.
of each one. Yeah, there's a gift in each
Yeah.
one, and to be a blend of those things, I think that's really actually beautiful.
Yes.
And why we can learn from the past and what other people have done, you know.
Right.
I really love that. So,
Yeah.
well, I would just tell you, I remember, and it might have been the first time you guys met.
It was.
You came up to a table we were sitting at and just said hello, right?
I was I think you were in the middle of writing your dissertation. I'm pretty positive. We were in Florida or something. It was like a CMN dinner or something.
Yeah, and I just,
that's
we
right.
would go to all these pastors' gatherings and stuff, and we would kind of make the joke of like, people come up to us and be like, hey, what's your name? You know, we tell them our name. And then there's always this question they were going to get to where they were going to lose interest in us. We knew it.
Where are you from?
Yeah, they would say, where are you from? We'd be like, North Dakota.
Can we
And
get
they'll-
3 deep or 2?
Yeah, how many questions can we get in front of North Dakota? Because we would literally tell them North Dakota, and it was like, it was almost like they saw
It's kind of like what you've been talking about. Like, you can't really offer me.
they kind
anything.
of saw us as a channel of like, I can't really give and receive anything from North Dakota. And literally their eyes would begin to bounce the room at that point in the conversation. It was like predictable.
Yeah.
It was so crazy. And it's still like we have those moments. But one thing, but we became very drawn to people that were like a reservoir.
Well,
you know?
You notice very quickly the people that don't, and
Yeah,
you were
that are
one of
still
those
invested
people.
in who you are as people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I distinctly remember that conversation because it felt like we talked to you for about 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was like that. It was like you poured out deep water into our lives, like kind of a profound thought and conversation. And then you're like, it's good to meet you. And it was very genuine. And then it ended. But it was like we received life, you know, in 90 seconds. And so I think it's something you embody, you know, so much. And you've been marked in our minds, I think, for being an example of living that way, you know, and valuing people and seeing them and whether you can gain something from them or not,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Agreed.
so I think I'm just trying to say thanks for living what you're writing. You know, it seems that you are.
Yeah.
You know? And Justin, too, your husband, you know, we got to spend some time with him
A couple months ago.
And he's just the same way, like, yeah, I'm just going to come grab dinner and be with you for a little bit, you know, and it's something you just don't find all the time these days, you know, people that are like that. So we always say like, those are our people, you know, we love that. So.
Yeah.
We all have
Like-
work to do, right, to resist like some of the celebrity culture that the church and broader culture is, I think, finding ourselves in. And I'm not picking at anyone, but I think there is this assumption, again, almost subconsciously, of like, what can you do for me? And I think, or this like pecking order, this is not the way of the kingdom of God. It's just not. And I just think all of us have a responsibility in it. And we all perpetuate it at some level too, because, I mean, if you're on social media, I guess if you live under a rock, which sounds fabulous sometimes to me, it's not, I don't think realistic, but you know.
How do I get under the rock these days?
Yeah.
That's what we should all be asking.
Look like, but to, because again, I guess maybe going back to what we've been talking about, if we really feel seen by God and we attend to that, and we make that a priority because we're not just a tool in his hand.
Yeah.
We're also his kid. We're also his daughter or his son. And so the more we receive the love of God in our lives, and the more we have to give to others. But we really can't give what we don't have.
That's good.
And that's where I go back to the reservoir thing. And what I think is the invitation for all of us is like, keep getting a revelation of how good God is and how much he loves you, because it will change then the way you see everyone you make contact with. It will change the world. But there's a good, healthy order to it. And we're so eager to change the world. But sometimes to kind of last in our Christian faith and life, we also have to attend to our own receiving of the gospel in our own lives over and over and over again. Yeah. So thank you for your kind words.
Yeah. Well, I think practically for me too, that's meant to have a fresh revelation means I'm going to find a different way to pray for a season, than just the normal rhythm, or I'm going to read the Bible in a different way. I'm going to do a chronological, or I'm going to do a 1 year, or I'm going to I'm just going to do one chapter for a month, like the same chapter over and over until it hits me different every day, and so maybe if somebody's in kind of that, there's a rut there, I think, that we can all get into in our walk with the Lord, or even a disappointment of like, how do I get a fresh revelation of God? And I've always found, man, if I will change the method a little bit, and there's so many tools out there. I mean, Bible reading apps and prayer apps and different things that you can use. That's always helped me kind of like see God differently.
I think for us, it really changed when we read Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge.
Yeah.
And have you read that book?
That's a beautiful book.
It is beautiful. Okay. It is.
It's that same tone.
Very similar. Yeah. And, what were you talking about? Oh, where he does it in a chapter where it really focuses on like the goal of your life should be union with God, period. And even like when you talk about different methods or getting in a rut where no matter what it is, I think for us, it broke down some legalism that had taken root of like, has to look this way. And this is how you connect with God and under these constraints. And that just was a mindset shift of, no, all these things are coming against this union with God, like even distraction or taking of my time. And my goal is to just reunify with God and just be near him and with him. I think you've said that so much. He's with us. And that, yes, the methods, and you can look to that, but the goal is union with God, period. And to keep that in mind, because I can get so easily caught in that of, I've only read this many books of the Bible or chapters or this much time today. And then we lose sight of really the true gift that is him with us and his presence. And but I think with that, wouldn't you say that's when you kind of found that freedom of, no, it doesn't have to look just one way. There's in nature, or maybe it's laughing with your kids, or sometimes I feel like when we're you and I, Josh, are in a deep conversation, I feel union with God because it's like, you're this gift to me from God. How sweet of my Heavenly Father. And you can take anything because all things are a gift from God, and really have union with him.
Right.
I love that.
We've actually mentioned a whole bunch of resources we should just tell people about. Like, it's Getting Your Life Back, right? That's the title.
Get Your Life Back.
Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge is a great, beautiful read.
Or listen.
Yeah, or listen. We listen a lot.
We do.
John Mark Comer writes the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yeah.
There it is. And then Jefferson Bethke has To Hell with the Hustle. He also has a great podcast.
Him and John Mark Comer did one
together. They did one together, but we love a lot of Jefferson's, just how he builds his family based on rest, which is really cool.
We've loved their realness about Sabbath, like having Sabbath rest with little kids.
Yes.
Which I would say can be the most maddening thing. And it's like, this is not the point. Oh, this is not the point. I just remember one day in my flesh where I looked at Josh and said, these kids are ruining Sabbath. Because you're like, we're trying to rest and enjoy one another.
Yeah.
And it's supposed
Think about
to be
you, God.
Oh, I know. It's such a reminder, right? We look just like them. Sorry,
It's like
I digress.
somebody said something that changed our lives. They said it's not a vacation if you take your kids, it's a trip, right? It's only a vacation if you don't take your
The
kids.
kids are gone.
And it's almost, I don't know what the parallel is to Sabbath,
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to.
yeah, I don't have one. Surely your kids are a part of your Sabbath and your worship, but
I think
It is
too, man,
different.
in Sabbath, like in that even attempt, air quotes, but to Sabbath, it refines you of, oh man, I'm missing it in the rest that God has for me.
yeah.
I'm viewing these kids as a distraction from it.
In all seriousness, I
refine
would
me.
say it's union. You know, like
Yeah.
that really is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Because even to having a higher view of God, Sabbath being worship, like it is union with God.
it is.
It's union with people. You know, it's union with biblical community. Even going out and kicking the soccer ball with Avery at the end of the day, like there's worship to that.
Yes.
You know, that is a reset for the soul. And so it's really
Right.
like, what is union with God and with God's people?
Yeah.
And in the covenant relationships that I'm in, what does that actually look like? And then how
Yes.
can I regularly practice
Practice.
that? And if I can get in the, I mean, it just happened a couple weeks ago. You know, I got to like a Thursday and I was like, oh, Jenaye, I just feel off and not good. And she goes, yeah, you didn't Sabbath.
You were
Like
traveling
I traveled,
last weekend.
you know,
so
I
you
traveled and did
didn't get it.
ministry and it was like, it was a noticeable, like
Yeah.
something's off in me.
Mm-hmm.
And just finding that place of building union with God and people. So
Sorry, you were saying resources, and I went on a tangent.
those
about
were the
young
three I was
kids.
going to give actually
Yeah.
was, Jeff Bethke and John
Yeah.
Mark Homer and John Eldridge all have really pretty beautiful work on.
Yeah.
this topic, so.
Anything that, I mean, outside of the beautiful Word of God that you
Yeah.
discovered on your journey too?
I would. It's a little different, but in my mind, really related. Have you guys read Anonymous
Yes.
by Alicia Jolie? She's been kind of a mentor and a pastor to me for the last 13, 14 years. And so that book to me was really pivotal when I found myself not as visibly productive for God in the first time in my life since I was a teenager. And that there was this other value system in the kingdom of God that I didn't understand. Like I thought it was like all about what people could see and how hard I was working
Yes.
and the visible parts of our lives. Like it was just foreign concept to me that like there's this inner life, there's these things under the surface that are kind of informing actually for the long haul, like what that outer life looks like and just attending to that. And so that was a really important book to me.
I would
back in the
say
day.
that would be one of the top books if I was writing down out of all the top books, because I read it right as I was starting to just really serve Jesus, like
Really?
fresh in college, like very much not deep roots in Christ yet. And just, it was so pivotal. And
Yeah.
because to frame what he's doing within me and just like God's building something in you, and so you can last and doesn't have to be seen. It is a beautiful book.
It will, if you struggle, if you have a mediocre view of God or an impoverished view of God or just a good view of God and you want to, I've come back to it several times and just walking with her. I mean, she just always, she's been a gift to kind of raise it and think thoughts worthy of God. And
Love that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks for coming to North Dakota. I mean, it's in August, so it's not as big of a sacrifice as others have made, but it's still, we're so grateful that you're
Yes.
You're right.
We,
Should this
Well, when
have
people
come
will
in
be
6
listening.
months?
yeah.
very true.
I told Jenaye, I was like, I thought in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to get fall before all the Texans, you know? But it was like 90s here
I think
today.
you're going to get it like in the next couple, like tomorrow.
Tonight.
I told him,
and
I was
tomorrow
like,
morning.
we're kind of
Yeah.
in the North Dakota can't decide. Well, we're recording this in August. I don't know when people are going to listen to
Probably
this.
not
Yeah.
until later into the fall, yeah.
So you'll probably be listening.
Enjoy
sipping on
your
your
pumpkins,
pumpkin
people.
spice.
And you'll be like 90 what?
With your scarf and your
What at 90
boots.
degrees?
All the things.
Yeah, enjoy your layers.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
the work that you did and the way you've lived it out. And I know you're entering into, you've just gone through different seasons in life and executive pastoring in different churches and then into study and just kind of seasons of lengthening and strengthening. And so we just love watching that and appreciate your family and your wisdom and insight on this topic. So thanks for coming on
Yeah.
Thanks
and
for
being a part of
having
it.
you.
Thanks
like I
everybody
learned
else
so
too.
much.
I know, me too. It's a great conversation.
It is,
and I
yeah.
think something,
Good and challenging.
yeah. So thanks to everybody else who joined too in the conversation, and we're so glad you were a part of it. And so, Jenaye, tell them all the things because I always forget.
You know, subscribe to the podcast if you have not yet. Rate it. It really helps. And share it with your friends. And we are excited to talk to you next episode.